Hey guys, Michael here again with you. I want to talk a little bit about how people work, how people are ambivalent towards a lot of things. And ambivalence is when you're torn in two different directions at once, like love-hate would be an ambivalent type of feeling where you don't know whether you love somebody or hate them, but you know that you feel very strongly about what they're doing. My idea is that every single one of us kind of has two different minds. Like if you look at the way that the brain is put together, you've got your brainstem, you've got the cerebellum, you have these different layers, these different lobes, these different parts of the brain that are built upon each other. And there's parts of the brain that we share with animals, all the way back to reptiles, all the way back to fish. And then there's things that are unique to us, like our frontal cortex and prefrontal cortex, things that allow us to think. The problem is that new human thinking logical part of the brain that lets us understand that, there's not spirits and devils in the world and, that we don't have to be afraid of the dark. That part of the brain is built upon a much older part of the brain that all animals, all vertebrates share in common. And that part of the brain has some funny ideas about how to stay alive. Ideas like be afraid of the dark, because predators like to use the dark to ambush you and you could get ate if you're not afraid of the dark. Like there's reasons that we have these base instincts where we fear or want to avoid certain things. Pain. Pain is a really big one. Pain literally is only in your mind. You should be able to completely ignore that. But why is it so hard to do that? Because your brain is pre-wired to prioritize stopping pain above just about everything else. You want to stop pain so bad that you would hurt yourself to stop pain. Like if your finger, got bit by some insect, and it lasted for months. Imagine being in agony and feeling like your finger's in a hot coal for months. You might be tempted to cut that finger off. Even though you would be hurting yourself. That's how much our brain prioritizes pain and stopping painful sensations. And we can override that to some extent, but it is so deeply wired and deeply ingrained in us that to do that over the long term is difficult, if not impossible. It's hardwired. If we were an android, overriding pain would be kind of like an android trying to override, Asimov's basic laws. Like if it's built into the architecture, how do you override that and work around it? The same way with our self-preservation, we are wired to want to survive. And the reason that we have all these instincts is because they work. You don't want to stand in fire. You don't want to go play with the lion who's going to eat you. You don't want to do things that could hurt you or cause you to die. So it works. If it didn't work, if you, say, enjoyed pain, if you had no self-preservation instinct, you probably wouldn't live long enough to reproduce and pass that life-hating, pain-loving gene onto your children. So we are wired this way because it works. The problem is that while that may have worked millions of years ago, it doesn't necessarily mean that it works so well in our modern life, because we're not living in a natural world anymore. We're living in a world that we created. Give you an example. We are all predators, angry little murder monkeys. When somebody cuts you off in traffic, you'd like to drop them off of a cliff. That's still our innate instinct to want to use violence to solve problems. If you look at our movies and our storytelling and our media, how many movies are solved by gunplay? Like how many times, does the ultimate showdown of a movie or a story end with them talking it out? There's a reptile animalistic part of us that revels in violence. There's a part of us that wants to be the boss, wants to smack the shit out of people that question us, you dominate them, part of us wants to be the alpha. Now, I hate violence personally. I am a very nonviolent person. I use my words. I don't swing my fists. But even there's certain people in my life that have annoyed me for 15 years. And when they start annoying me, I'm like, oh, you motherfucker. One part of me wishes that it would just stop. Even if them stopping meant that they won the lottery, I would still wish for that, because the goal for me would be to get that peace and quiet and to not have this person ruining my joy. But there's another part of me that kind of wishes they would have to move, lose their house or something like that. And it makes me very sad to think that there's a part of me that thinks like that. But it's there, and I would be lying to myself if I didn't admit that there's some part of me that wants vicious retribution, Fuck that guy. I recognize that is kind of my inner chest beater rearing its head, and I can learn to ignore it. So then there's the other part of us, the human part, the prefrontal cortex, the frontal cortex, the part where we exercise logic and reason, the part where we have language, the part where we have art, and where we can imagine things, where we can see something in the world that doesn't exist, and we can imagine what it would be like if it existed, and we can think about what it would take to bring it into existence, and then we can actually execute that plan and do it and make something that never existed before. All that is up here. That is the new part of the brain, the human part of the brain. But again, if this is a house, that part of the brain is kind of like a new second story that was added on. But most of the house and the foundation is still that angry little chest-beating monkey. Now here's the problem. This is a new part of the brain. It is not hardwired in the same way that our perception of pain is. It's not wired the same way that our fear of the dark or our distrust of strangers is. This is a part of the brain that, if there are two possible answers to a problem, there's what we think and then there's what we feel. What we feel is more real to us than what we think. And it is very, very difficult. The same level of difficulty as trying to ignore a nail through your toe, trying to ignore intense pain. It is very difficult to ignore the part of you that feels something. And again, the part of you that feels something, those instincts might have helped us hundreds of thousands of years ago, but they don't necessarily help us today in a modern society where we have to trust each other in order for society to work. In order for us to have railroads, you have to trust that people aren't going to come along between the trains and pull the tracks up and go sell the rails, for scrap steel. You can't have trains if people do that. In order to have roads and have cars on those roads for people to drive places, you have to trust that the person driving the 3,000-pound murder machine next to you doing 70 miles an hour on the freeway is not going to just suddenly swerve the wheel and take you out. You have to trust that the people around you are not trying to kill you, murder you, steal from you, or whatever. Society, people cannot operate without that social contract that says, I am not going to murder you and you're not going to murder me. Society could not exist without that basic contract of trust. But your instinct is to distrust. Your instinct is that angry looking person over there who keeps eyeballing you. You think that they want to do harm to you. They might not. You have no way of knowing what's going on in their head, and they can't control how they look, how you perceive them, right? I'm a big guy. I can be very scary when I get upset or excited, The point is that what we think matters less to the brain than what we feel. So it is very difficult, and it requires a lot of mental discipline for you to ignore what you feel and concentrate on what you think. Let's say that you're driving down the road at night and you see somebody on the side of the road. They're a different race than you. Culturally, they're different. You're more likely to question, are they laying on the side of the road because they're really hurt and I need to help them? Are they laying on the side of the road because this is a trap, so I'm going to distrust them? Like this looks like a setup. Like all these thoughts go through your head. If that person looks like the people you're used to being around, if they have the indicators that they are one of your tribe, so to speak, you're more likely to help them and to not fear them. And when we are afraid of things, we don't tend to think very clearly. Fear is a very powerful tool to use to manipulate people. People can use fear to shut down the thinking part of another person's mind and make them react. And once you get somebody reacting, once you get them using the animal part of their brain instead of thinking about things, you can manipulate them more easily. And so you should look for fear in any kind of conversation you're having, television shows you're watching, documentaries, political speeches, speeches in general. If somebody's trying to scare you, you need to be immediately on your guard and be very conscious of what they're saying, and you need to think very critically about what they're saying. Like, it's very easy to say we're being attacked and these so-and-sos are responsible for it. You know, all of our problems can be traced back to this one group of people who are ruining it for the rest of us. They, them, and us. When you hear that type of rhetoric and you see that type of action, you should step back and say, all right, somebody is trying to get me to think a certain way without actually thinking. They're trying to force me to see only one answer to a problem. And I don't like being manipulated like that. So I'm going to be extra critical of what they're saying. It's difficult. It's very difficult to override your instinct. And your instinct is going to be afraid and to think that the person is speaking the truth, the honest truth. And oh my God, I feel everything that they're saying. It resonates with me. So overall, what I'm saying is that we need to be distrustful of our feelings sometimes. Not all feelings are bad. Love is a feeling, and love is something I think is very important. Trust is a feeling, right? But you want to make sure that you're being rational about these things, that you're not going based on just your instinct. Like, we want to feel something about something, but that doesn't make it true. And we need to remember constantly that just because we feel something does not mean that that's the way that it is. We need to be critical of our feelings, and the more that we feel the need to feel a certain way, like if we instinctually find that we distrust somebody, or we instinctually find that we believe somebody, we need to question why that is. Is it the way they look? Is it the way they talk? Is there an actual factual and logical, verifiable reason for us to think this? And we need to try to separate what we think from what we feel, so that when we get that ambivalence, where one part of us wants to punch somebody in the face and another part of us wants to kiss them on the mouth, we can make better sense of it. Because that ambivalence, that feeling two very opposite things at the same time, that human condition, that is the human part of our brain arguing with the animal part. And the animal part usually wins, again, because it's hardwired. It feels more real than what we think. But you can compensate for that. You can overcome it. You have to have very strong mental discipline to give more power to your thoughts than your feelings. And you should. It'll be harder to mislead you. You will make better decisions. You will make less mistakes. And you will be less likely to fall victim to being another reactionary, moronic idiot, doing something that at the moment feels awesome, but that on reflection, you can't believe you did that. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for watching my video.